She woke from what felt like a long night's rest, dazed and slow. She glanced her eyes around, slowly being drawn toward the ceiling, lured to a slow, pulsing red light the size of a tack, lighting and extinguishing at a monotonous and predictable rate. Every time the red light pulsed, more and more of her surroundings were revealed. She tried to raise a hand to rub the sleep from her eyes, only to meet resistance. She couldn't move anything above her wrists. She moved her hands in an attempt to figure out the range of motion she was limited to. The only thing her right hand could reach was her left hand. They were bound closely together behind her back. She tried to grasp at the material confining her movement to determine the make and feel of her restraints. It was hard metal, cold, sleek, and indifferent. Both wrists in the same tight loop. She tried to lift her head to look at her restraints and move from her reversed fetal position. Her head lifted upwards with ease, but looking downwards or horizontally more than a small measure was met by a firm hold, her neck chafing and choking on some implement if she tried more than a mite. She next tried moving her legs, her torso. Her feet were bound to the floor, her ankles brought together taut and linked into the floor of the box by some new age cordage, both light and solid. Her torso linked to both her ankle and wrist restraints in a way that rendered her incapable of any significant movement. She was in a darkened metal box of moderate size, tall enough for her small frame to stand in. If she was able to stand, and about that wide and long. It felt both humid and cold, and looked a grayish shade of blue, and was unfamiliar in construction. One wall was different from the rest, being an opaque shade of white. She heard a low hissing noise deriving from a small hole in the ceiling the size of a quarter. It was blowing something into the box. Maybe gas, maybe oxygen. She couldn't tell. The girl enclosed in the box was Alice. She had plans today. She had to present to her class in 4th period. She had stayed up later than she should have been preparing. Where am I? Where the hell am I? She asked herself. A dream. Quite elaborate. You're working overtime, Mr. Brain. I must have missed the bus. I need to get up. It's better to be late than absent. I'll get dressed. No time for a shower, but I've got to wash my face and brush my teeth at least. Stuff some cereal in me and see if I can harass a ride out of Dad. Let's get up and get it started. She tried to stand, which confirmed her fears. It stopped her lie. She wasn't in a dream or a nightmare. This was not a fiction her brain was cruelly conjuring. It felt too real. She tensed her muscles, trying to move her arms, crying for them to follow her commands. What is going on? This isn't real. It can't be real. I go to sleep and wake like this? Did I die? Where am I? Panic overcame her. She was stuck. Her chest tightened. Her breaths became more rapid. Her eyes darted and muscles bulged. Adrenaline rushed through her. She strained against her bonds with every measure of strength she possessed, to no avail. She laid on the cold ground, sweating and breathing deeply, tired from her exertion. A sense of shame and resignation simmered. Was this her fault? Why was she here? Had she done something wrong again? Why? It was always her fault. She couldn't move, and the weight holding her down, and the lack of control, all combined to make her feel ill. Her head began to spin, and her stomach collapsed in on itself with a sickly feeling overcoming her. It felt all too familiar. Don't ask for new shoes. You ruined my marriage, you little... I shouldn't have had you. Her mother's word filled her mind. Worry and guilt and dread engulfed her. It was her fault. It wasn't. It couldn't be. It always was. Why would it be different this time? Her heart quickened and a panic took over her again. Is anyone there? She tried to scream. Nothing came. From her voice, she gasped on air, emitting no volume. What is going on? She mouthed, desperate. Dad? Nobody replied to the mute girl. She began to sob silently, tears streaming from her eyes. Alone in the near dark and involuntarily motionless, she couldn't move. She couldn't talk. She couldn't understand. What felt like hours passed. She was hungry and thirsty. Her lips were chapped and dried. She looked down and saw blood running down her chest. She had rubbed raw some of the skin on her neck from bucking and fighting against her restraints. It dried and caked on her skin and the floor below after some time. You need to stay calm. You're going to be okay. The optimist in her argued. You fool. You're dead. You don't wake up in a box restrained and expect anything good. There is not a single way this goes well for you. You are done. Your life is over as you know it. What's next? An awful death, probably. Maybe sprinkle in some torture. You may even be better off dead. Do you think that maniacs who kidnap people in the night are often well-adjusted? Do you think at the end of the day you're going to just get up and go home? You wasted your short life, and this is where it ends. It's really a good thing. You had this coming. You deserve this. You get home and you see that scowl. She doesn't even try to hide it. She won't even care if you disappeared. She'll probably be happy deep down. You ending up dead is for the best. She can start again, unburdened by you. What about Dad? What about him? Yes, he loves you, but he'll get over it. You'll be in some dusty offhand section in the story of his life he'll tell his new children. You'll be forgotten and that'll be it. No, you know that's wrong. You see the smile he wears when he sees you. It would destroy him to lose you. If for no other reason, you should move forward. You'll grow old eventually and be your own person. No longer a thing. Look forward to that instead of dwelling on the present. Look forward to what? A horrific end? You have nothing good ahead of you. In the short term, sure, but let's not get off topic. If you woke up from this and this turned out to be a dream, nothing would have changed you, slimy, undeserving. The internal argument stopped as a door materialized from the side opposite to the opaque wall. Bright light flooded in, forcing Alice's eyes reflexively closed. By the time she had forced her eyelids to reopen, she saw them. Two figures stood silhouetted in the new doorway, one roughly twice the height and width of her, carrying a tablet, and one approximately her size, which had 4 appendages on each side, 2 being more tentacle-like, uncovered by the suit the beings wore. The 2 beings had no physical similarities besides the suit that wrapped around their forms. It was gray and with a black visor on what Alice guessed was the faces of the 2 figures. Shock overtook her. She froze. Some alien creature straight out of a movie stood mere feet from her. She was defenseless, and at the mercy of some being who had likely placed her into the predicament she was currently in. The large one gave the tablet he was holding a few taps, causing a panel on the interior of the box to phase to the surface of the wall. After a series of fast taps on the panel, the large being at the wall made a sharp and quick noise, something animal-like and unnatural to Alice's ears, and the 8-armed, normal-sized figure entered the box and started towards her. The reality of the situation had hit her. She recoiled away from the figure. She couldn't go far. She cried silently and begged with her eyes for it to stay away. Anything! Stay away! The creature did not heed her requests. It took out a small black stick, about half a foot long from a pouch on the exterior of the suit. With a flick of the creature's tentacle, the stick lengthened multi-fold. Alice shook her head quickly, a few degrees each way, as that was all the mobility her restraints allowed. The creature stared at her convulsing shape. It knelt down to her, left and smashed the black stick into the floor with great force. It flashed with bits of electricity, and the crack the impact made caused her to flinch back hard, reopening the raw skin on her neck. It then looked back towards her and stared. There was a long pause before it coughed out a sharp noise. It animated, its arms as though it was annoyed. It poked the stick and pointed to the ground. It then poked her knee with its tentacle and pointed at the impact mark on the floor. The threat was obvious. The tentacle the alien touched her with was wet and slimy and sent shivers through her. Then a brief moment later it burned. She watched as some slimy residue left from where the alien had touched her seeped into her skin. It didn't burn through her flesh, but it burrowed in deep, leaving no mark of it having existed. It burned. It burned hotter than dropping your hand into a boiling pot of oil. Her skin and muscle and sinew and tendons and every building block of her mobility sizzled and burned and cried in shock. She wriggled and kicked and writhed in agony, and it was made all the worse that there was no sink to run it under, no water for her to put the flame out, no way to speak, to cry out, to beg for the creature in front of her to help. She was alone with only her mind to scream to. The creature shuffled back quickly. It made a few droning noises with intermittent pauses towards the larger creature standing at the door, who subsequently lumbered off. Afterwards, the tentacled alien stood back up and leaned its back up against the opaque wall. It watched on as Alice squirmed about in misery. Minutes passed. Alice had fallen unconscious several times just to wake back up moments later to the same searing pain, the same sensation of being cooked alive within her own skin. The pain had spread up to her hip. The being watched on in silence, attentive to her situation, but not doing anything about it. Eventually, the larger alien returned and handed the being inside the box a white cylindrical item the shape and size of a pen. It gripped it with one of the non-tentacled limbs that adorned its torso. Though delirious, Alice still saw the movement, back towards her, and while the pain had not diluted in the least, she froze stock still. She opened her mouth to scream, and nothing came out. She went to shield herself with her arms, and she couldn't move them. She tried to think of some way out of this, and she couldn't. She sat there and waited for the inevitable. Though not a conscious thought, she knew she no longer had a say in the matter. The alien knelt down carefully, and after a brief moment stabbed the pen into her thigh. The alien then stood back up and went back to leaning on the wall. Nothing changed instantly, but over the matter of a few minutes, the writhing and squirming became shivering and muted twitches, whether from the commotion and action of the last few minutes or from some byproduct of the injection she received. Alice felt sedated and calm, content even. Sweat covered the floor and blood and tears covered her. She was exhausted, ready to sleep, if not for a glaring problem. Her box was still inhabited by something else. It hadn't moved. It stood there, black visor staring. After about a minute, the creature made its move. It walked over to the defeated girl. It paced around her before crouching down and presenting its tentacle and waggling it above her face. Alice's eyes bulged and she tried to sink into the ground. The other creature at the door barked something. The alien in the room droned something back. It made a quick and repetitive noise multiple times, like a snort, but more cough-like. It stood back up and flicked its tentacle, some of the slime dropping to the ground and some far too close to her. It stopped its noise and began its task. Using its non-venomous limbs, it removed her restraints one by one. Legs, then arms, then the linking sections. It was happening. Eventually, she was bare of metal and bonds. It was a good start. It didn't last long. The creature beckoned her to stand. Her body was heavy, her limbs non-compliant. She was cold and malnourished, but she stood. Her tired eyes stared at the black visor covering the alien's face, awaiting commands. She saw her own tired visage reflected back at herself in the impromptu mirror. Her blue eyes were still blue, but dulled and drowsy. Her body was much the same but held differently, her shoulders lower, her head slightly down. Her long hair was unkempt and indicative of her general state. Her neck slowly dripped blood down her naked form. Her arms and legs were still discolored, from the lack of movement and oxygen. The creature grabbed a hose and sprayed her down with a greenish liquid. The liquid shot out at a high pressure from feet to face. It was as if she was getting hit in the face by sleet. The liquid was ice, cold, and it wasn't refreshing. It did act like a shower, which Alice was appreciative of on some level. There was no towel at the end, and with the door still open, the ambient temperature had lowered, leaving Alice shivering. Why me? Why fucking me? Please just let me wake up. Please, please, please. The larger alien handed the one in the box an item. Just let me go home. I'll do anything. Please. She saw what the item was. No, I don't want to. She stumbled back, grabbing at the wall to maintain her balance. The alien, holding it, walked forward. It wiggled its tentacle, before beckoning her towards it. The larger alien got lower and blocked the entrance. There was no running. Please no, she mouthed. Nothing came out. I can't. The alien neared. I won't. She tried to speak. Please. Alien raised the collar it was holding and beckoned her forward. She froze. The alien walked forward. She didn't move. It made a low droning noise and stopped for a moment before continuing on. She couldn't move. She couldn't fight. She stood there motionlessly staring at the approaching object. It was a metal object that would surround her neck perfectly. It had knobs and dials and all manner of buttons on the exterior. It opened wide. It was staring into her core. It snapped shut around her throat. It was over. Needles stabbed into her neck. It choked her of oxygen and it squeezed her neck of life. She tried to pry it off, pushing her fingers under the metal. It squeezed harder. She fell to her knees, then face first onto the floor. Crying, she looked up to the visor-faced alien. She grabbed at its boot and fell unconscious. Alice woke up. She was still in the metal box. She felt her throat. It was there. She tried to slip her fingers under the seal to no success. Though the collar was distressing in its own way, she wasn't bound to the floor motionless, so it was better to her. She ran her hands through her hair and began to cry. Who am I? You're Alice? Sure. I'm Alice, but who am I? I told you. You're Alice. Who am I, past that? I'm a girl with dreams and aspirations and hopes and wants, and I am me because of my personality, and for all the reasons my personality became the way it is. I'm me because of my looks. I am me because of my upbringing. I'm me because of any number of things. I'm me because you're not very convincing. I think I'm convincing. That's really what matters, right? What dreams do you have? What aspirations? I want to grow up for one. You're not doing very well on that front. Fuck you. I want to get out of my home and go to school and get a job and meet someone and live with them and do better than my parents did. Oh, wow. You're really unique. You don't matter to me. I am me. You are something else. Why did you ask for an opinion? I don't know. I wanted a second opinion to mirror mine. I wanted approval. You sad little creature. You've been nothing but an observer your entire life. Stop living in your head and focusing on the past. Go out there and live your life. What's left of it, at least. Shut up. I didn't choose this. Sure, but you're here now. Alice grimaced and stood up. Time passed and she paced in the box. The red pulsing light was the only stimulus. Her thirst and hunger had only worsened. The box jolted. It felt like it was lifting. It was as if she was on the pendulum of a grandfather clock. Back and forth, back and forth. She'd have thrown up if she had anything in her stomach left to vomit. She was running on empty. After a while, it impacted into the ground, and then, a while later, it started moving upwards. Alice sat curled up, waiting for it to end. Eventually it did, the motion stopping abruptly. A moment later, the opaque white wall became see-through. She walked over and looked through it to see an ocean of colors and figures, an ocean of creatures and aliens. Some sitting, some standing, some motioning and moving. They were of all colors and sizes and contained every unique quality she could imagine, and some she couldn't. There was one thing they all had in common, though. All were staring at her. She was some great fire to them, some fantastic beacon for their attention. She couldn't hear from inside the box, but she could tell she had caused a commotion. A symbol above her box was changing and growing longer. With every passing moment, she was being auctioned off. You're here now. The symbol above her head slowed to a crawl before at last coming to a stop. The commotion her entrance caused had died down. Not long after, the opaque wall solidified and she could no longer see through it. The same nausea-inducing lifts and drops and turns all occurred again, but in reverse. After finally coming to a stop, Alice closed her eyes and breathed, a bit of peace. She had her own guess as to what the auditorium of aliens was doing there. She wouldn't admit her guess to anyone, though, not even herself. She expected re-entry by the suited creatures shortly after the box became stationary. But she had to wait. She had nothing but time to sit and think. That must have been a conference of scientists. She lied to herself. Right, I've just been in a quarantine, to make sure I haven't got some crazy viral disease that had wiped them out. Stop kidding yourself. I'm not stupid. I know what I said isn't true. It was just a bit of harmless fantasy. You're still lying. How? You truly wish that was the case. You come out of this box and you're welcomed as an ambassador and hailed as a pioneer in human God knows what relations. Alice cringed. A little too close to the truth? You're probably getting shipped off to some mine. Maybe to some menagerie of exotic creatures. Probably something worse seeing as how things have gone so far. Little old Alice is living a life only a mother could dream of for their child. Hey, remember Julie? Your best friend. You'll never see her again. You're alone. You'll never see anyone you remember ever again. Your memories of your family, of your friends, of your teachers, and anyone else you ever saw walking down the side of the street will fade to vague memories, and when you try to think of their faces, it will just conjure indistinct shapes, and it'll make you wish for better days. Or who knows, maybe you'll be dead in a few days, one can hope. Alice dug her head into her knees. Just shut up. Please, just be quiet. No, you deserve this, remember? You deserve this and more. Every ill you suffer is something you've earned. No, that's wrong. Good joke. A real comedian. Why do I imagine you? You make me feel awful, because you hate yourself, because you believe what I say, because I'm you deep down. You're not me. I'm not a miserable pessimist. I'm not hateful. I have flaws, but I'm not you. What felt like 30 minutes passed, and finally the door opened. It was just the larger alien this time, still wearing the suit. It motioned with its limb for her to come forward. After a slight delay, she walked to the door. She saw what lay beyond the doorway for the first time. Immediately after the door was a glass room that was attached to a corridor with beige walls. Along that corridor were other glass rooms with similar-looking boxes. Some had blinking red lights above their doorways. Most had a solid yellow light. Maybe that indicated vacancy. The alien tapped on its own neck before grabbing her shoulder. It held her firm with one limb and began fiddling with her collar with another. She felt a hard press on her neck and her vision blurred. Did that work? The alien spoke in a gravelly voice. She could hear it speaking. She could understand it. She opened her mouth almost hesitantly. Yes, she mouthed. She still couldn't speak. Can you hear me? It asked again. Yes! She tried to yell, only rasping out warm air. Are you stupid? Answer me. She pressed on her throat, trying to mime that ordinarily she could talk. Did they grab a deficient one? Nod your head if you understand me. She nodded her head. The visor stared at her for a moment before what was underneath let out an annoyed grunt. What a shit show. There was too much risk for this not to work now. It began to pace, a nervous tension in its step. It stopped abruptly. Get back in. It walked towards her, crowding her back into her pen. Alice shuffled back a few steps and the door closed after the alien pressed a button. A few minutes passed before the door reopened. Get out here. Boss isn't happy, but it doesn't really matter that you can't talk. The payment has already been transferred. What does that mean? You know what that means. She closed her eyes and slightly shook her head before looking back at the alien. Stay still. This might hurt. It will certainly feel odd. It fiddled with a dial on the collar before pressing a button. Air rushed into her throat, artificially filling her chest. She would have collapsed if the alien wasn't holding her shoulder. Like a vice. It took her a few breaths to adjust to the feeling. Different species have different ways of inhaling their necessary gases. This should help you breathe in most environments. The little glass room was airtight. It was probably just a way to be able to interact with her while not exposing the whole facility to her oxygen level. Wear this. It's a gift from your new owners. It handed her a folded piece of clothing, akin to a green toga. No footwear or undergarments, but it was far better than what she had previously. She put it on awkwardly. The alien's black visor stared at her the whole time. Turn around. She followed its orders. It grabbed onto her right wrist and snapped a ring around it. Without missing a beat, it grabbed her left hand and attached them together. Her wrists were bound again. She was led outside the glass room. Stand still. The alien took off its suit. Its frame was huge. It towered over her. The suit only served to hide its enormity. The hide that covered it was pitch black, the front of its head coated by countless eyes. When it twisted its head to glance rearwards, its neck rose like a fleshy accordion, like a corkscrew of cartilage. It was unnatural looking. Its features were inhuman and foreign. Her heart rate rose and her eyes dilated. Her body was fearful. Some baser instinct to survive took over, hijacking the controls with a noble goal, getting her through the storm. only to instantly seize up and fail at its one job. To see the aliens at a distance was one thing. Her eyes weren't very good, and without her glasses, it was easy to fill in some of the gaps in a way that made sense to her. To see a figure in a suit, even with a few extra limbs, was doable. Creatures on Earth had tentacles. She could figure out reasons and explanations that satisfied her mind. But when confronted with a true alien, face to face, she locked up. The creature's many eyes searched her over and stabbed at her inner being. It was truly monstrous up close. She stared back at the eyes before quickly averting her gaze. "Start walking," it commanded in a low tone. "What is that thing? Why is it acting like this is normal?" "This is not normal. None of this is normal. It's probably normal to it. This is just its day job." Day job? That thing should be in a slideshow my biology teacher shows in class, shaming our ancestors for having wiped them out. She watched the ground as they walked the corridor, trying her best not to make eye contact. The large alien was to her right. Its hand was clamped on her shoulder, pushing her at a steady pace. It stayed silent, bar a few grunts or annoyed clicks. After a few minutes of walking, they hit a door. The alien walked over to a keypad and entered a list of symbols. It then placed its arm into a hole in the wall before a small needle nicked into it. The door opened a moment later, with an orange light appearing above the door. The door opened to another corridor, much shorter this time. She could see the end of the hallway as soon as the door opened. After another opening sequence, they entered an elevator. It felt like they were going up for 5 minutes. 5 minutes in a small room with a creature that smelled rotten. When she was younger, a rat had managed to crawl behind their oven. It died, and after a few days it began to smell. It was the worst smell she had ever experienced. She tried to sleep with a clothespin attached to her nose. This creature outdid that smell. She would have cauterized her nostrils if she thought the odor would stop. Her nose ran, snot falling down her chin and onto the floor of the elevator. Her eyes watered. She began to uncontrollably salivate. More and more liquid filled her mouth, having to swallow to stop herself from drooling. It was like an allergic reaction. The alien eyed her. "Your sensory organs are very receptive. You're a fragile little thing. Your kind will get a lot of use." The elevator finally came to a stop. She stumbled out into the fresh air, almost falling over, but catching her balance before it happened. She hunched over and blew out snot from her face. Strings of fluid hung from her chin. She couldn't move her hands to wipe at her nose or eyes with her hands bound. Before she could gather herself, it spoke. "Keep moving." No rest, no catching her breath. It shoved her forward slightly. She began to walk again. It once again grabbed her shoulder and kept on marching. The walls were no longer beige, but now black. Everything was built for a species larger than anything she'd seen. The corridors were far wider than the creature walking behind her. Her dad's truck could drive through like it was a multi-lane highway. She trudged forward, walking and stumbling, her legs just barely following her instructions. There were no distinctions between the corridors they wandered through, no signage or symbols. Her captor directed her through it as if second nature. If the alien was absent, she was sure she'd have been lost after exiting the elevator. Eventually, they came to a door. It was nondescript and unremarkable next to the dozens of identical doors they'd passed by. She'd have kept on walking if the alien didn't pull her back. She loitered as the alien input symbols to a keypad. Her legs were at the end of their ability, tired and sore and complaining with every lift and drop that made up a step. The door led to a medium-sized lobby. It looked like an upscale prison, visitation room. She remembered what that looked like from visiting her brother a while back. There was a sheet metal table in the center of the room, surrounded by what looked like steel versions of those plastic dollar store lawn chairs. She walked around and searched the room with her eyes. She saw her goal after a bit of looking. She staggered toward the table on top of which sat a vase. It contained a clear liquid. She stared at it like a girl finding an oasis in the desert. She blinked to make sure it wasn't a mirage. She glanced to the many-eyed alien who was still lurking in the corner of the room. Alice motioned to the vase. The alien looked at her. She nodded at the vase, trying to let the alien know what she wanted. Please read the room, you monster. I need to drink. I need to eat. What's the rule again? 3 days for water and 3 weeks for food. I can wait for the food. I need the water. That's for the buyers. It's their call as to your feeding and whatnot now. She kept staring at the alien, pleading with her eyes. It stared back. Ask them when they get here. It won't be long, cold, and uncaring. She was probably applying human notions and beliefs to an alien mind, but she could swear the alien's face wore a smirk. It enjoyed its callous behavior. You don't get into this business if you're compassionate. Maybe its brain didn't understand that concept. She looked around, and her eyes spotted pillows on the chairs. She knelt down and dragged her face across, one of the pillows wiping off some of the liquids and phlegm that had begun drying to her face. Minutes passed. The black alien exited a door opposite from the side they entered. With her arms tight behind her back, it was difficult to find a comfortable way to sit. She touched her lip with her tongue. Her bottom lip was as hard as a scab. It had cracked open, dry, absent-minded, and with her mouth slightly open, she looked into a mirror and began to nudge and pinch at her long hair with her shoulder, trying to adjust it to improve her appearance. It was one of the few things she ordinarily prided herself in, and with her current level of autonomy, it was one of her few features she could fiddle with. It was likely pointless. She doubted the aliens noted her appearance in a way more than just noting a list of statistics. 4 limbs, 2 for ambulatory purposes, 2 for manipulation. Stands upright and is approaching 5 feet tall. Though she doubted they used Imperial, it gave her a sense of control over something, even if petty, that she currently craved. After a long wait, the door opposite of the entrance opened. 7 figures walked in. Alice watched as the group entered. At the head of the group was a white leather-skinned creature, standing upright on 3 legs. It wore a piece of black clothing similar to a tunic. Its neck spun out from its torso like a curled hog's tusk, ivory and proud. Upon its neck sat a hard and skinless skull, white and with a mouth bearing black teeth. It was filled in by 3 lidless, oily black eyes, piercing and watching her every twitch and glance. It quietly spoke to the group of other aliens that followed it, but it never broke eye contact with her. As it spoke, a grayish slim oozed from its maw just enough to make it noticeable, but not enough for gravity to take a grasp of it. It neared the table. It was tall, in the territory of 8 feet. "Hello." It spoke to her directly. Like a fork on a glass plate, its intonation and pitch and presence scraped against her ears. She flinched. The feeling wasn't so painful that she had to cover her ears, but enough to be unpleasant. The black teeth twitched slightly. It had seen her reaction. "Can you speak?" "My lieutenant said you weren't able to." She shook her head. She didn't know for certain if that was the universal sign for saying no, non-verbally, but it had worked so far. The other aliens had, by this point, formed into 2 groups, 2 different species of 3 members each. Ah, so Icarai's report was correct. That's a shame. We paid a premium for that translation module. It was supposedly quite cutting edge. Its eyes never wavered. It scoured her for every bit of movement, of any reaction she gave to its words. Alice tried to remain stoic, expressionless, but she was afraid she'd already lost the game. The wager wasn't for bragging rights or monopoly, money, but for life and limb. It looked over to the other creatures and spoke. "I don't lie to my clientele. There have been some issues. But looking at the circumstances, I believe we're bringing you what may be one of just a small handful of these creatures to be in circulation for quite some time." A few of the creatures nodded and murmured to each other. From the time word, got back from the Quital surveyor, that they had discovered a new cradle to now was just a few weekly cycles. The federal government swept in as fast as it could to set up a quarantine, but we were faster. Those shell-backed idiots don't know we even got one. The parties looked among themselves, congratulatory, slaps on carapace, quiet excitement was in the air. The quarantine for the last cradle world discovered lasted what? Several hundred yearly cycles, right? They're usually longer. Once the equipment gets in from the core worlds to set up a proper quarantine, there will be no more supply. You're probably not getting any more now that the capital ships arrived. Truthfully. Nods came from both groups. And although we're definitely the best in this industry, there are others, and they've likely managed to grab a few as well. Probably one of the opposite sex. Now, this is outside of my purview, but if you negotiate with the other owners, you could probably propagate this breed. The group members looked among themselves, nodding in agreement. It's a hypersensitive creature, emotional, and it wishes to please. It's a perfect fit for many of your desires. Alice couldn't protest with her voice. She might have stood to express her dismay, but she didn't. She was stunned. Not stunned in fear, but in confusion. What was she listening to? A laughter started in her mind. This is mad. This isn't real. Your eyes and ears haven't deceived you yet. What's different this time? The creatures continued talking amongst themselves. Her thoughts drowned them out. I want to go home. I want to see Dad again. I want to be anywhere but here. That sucks. You want a lollipop too? I fucking hate you. I hate so much I find it hard to describe. Oh, you hate yourself? Good, I do too. I hate these inhuman monsters dragging me around as if I was some object for them to do with as they please. I hate this facility. I hate the tentacled monster. I hate the neck accordion alien. I hate the ivory skull freak. I just want it to stop. Oh? How are you going to do that? Just ask politely? Give it a shot. See how it works out for you. She closed her eyes. Anger simmered in her. I'm going to get through this if for no other reason than to spite you. To spite me. If that means I have to bite my tongue and smile along until I get a chance, then so be it. If that means I have to cheat and beg and lie, then so be it. If that means I have hurt or maim or scratch or kill, then so be it. She opened her eyes. A small smile escaped her expressionless face. She caught her smile and leashed it as quickly as she let it slip. Now my understanding is that it can't speak. Who knows, though? This is new territory. This is the first new species discovered within the Federation's borders for quite some time. It may just be one of its species traits. Like how the Yakel communicate internally, like how the Paramale are so good at reading nonverbal cues, they never needed to evolve the ability to speak. Alice listened in on the conversation about herself. However demeaning or dehumanizing the topic, it intrigued her on some level. To know what impartial beings' priorities were and how they spoke about her was interesting in a morbid sense. To be a thing. She didn't like it. Or who knows, maybe it's just choosing not to speak. It may be a response to its situation. It might be a pride issue. Speaking from experience, a lot of tougher types don't speak after their capture. At least until you break their pride. You make them labor and starve and they'll start chatting. The white-skulled alien stared at her while talking, gauging her reaction down to every subconscious facial expression. A realization hit her. If she was a new species, then how would it discern what her reactions even meant? Surely different species would have different cues and tells. Perhaps there were some universal ones. Alice guessed its words were more for intimidation's sake than anything else. There were two groups on either side of the white-skulled alien. To its left was a group of feathered, vulture-headed creatures. Thin, furred necks led to their heads. They were tall and spindly. They had long wings almost reaching to the ground. The leader's left wing had sharpened claws on its hand, while its right hand was trimmed and declawed. They looked awkward and heavy for a species that should have been efficient and agile. The three vultures sat in a triangle. To the front sat what looked like the leader. It wore heavy robes and sat chest out, proudly. To the right sat a smaller version of the leader. It had similarly colored feathers and patterns. Finally, to the left was a creature of similar make but larger, and wearing a glossy black covering over its torso, something akin to armor. Likely a guard. It wore a sheath on its belt. A sleek metal blade was visible. The guard was paranoid, the eyes on its red, fleshy-toned skull darting and glancing at every slight occurrence. If a light blinked, if an electronic beeped, if Alice readjusted how she was sitting, it made sure its attention was given. Its focus was both complete and broad. The leader of the vulture heads spoke up. While I suppose most options are on the table, and you may be correct about your pride or racial trait theory, I think the easiest explanation would just be that you made an error. The vast majority of the 1,000-odd species in our great federation can speak. You just grabbed a defective one, maybe a juvenile. Perhaps during its capture one of your men injured it. Its voice was hoarse, creaking. Finally, the white-skulled alien looked away from her. It met the face of the bird-like leader. Its oily eyes stared at the bird head. The vulture gave no space, not budging or moving, daring White Skull to argue. The point. We've known each other for longer than you've your son, pointing to the smaller vulture head to the right of the leader. I haven't told you a lie yet. Alice fixated on the White Skull's black teeth as it spoke, mesmerized. The ooze was gently pulling and falling and rising with every syllable. My men aren't so incompetent to mess up something this expensive. It's just the way the thing came. The vulture stared back, looking White Skull up and down. Its eyes were old and yellowy, they gave no quarter to liars. It waited a moment. I'll take your word for it. It waved its wing offhandedly. It'll be quite the coup in my circle regardless of its competence. Whether it's of great mind or is an untalking fool isn't of much concern. The sheer novelty will itself be worthwhile. A novelty, like one of those fidget spinners. That's what you are, like some rare bug from a foreign land. Hey look, it has an extra limb. Oh! Its hind legs are 2 centimeters longer. That's you, a curiosity for their entertainment. To the left of the white-skulled alien sat another group of 3 gray leathery figures, large and with bulbous features. They were hunched forward. They had no clothing and sat in a line. The one in the center opened its mouth to speak. Its mouth consisted of 3 triangle-shaped pieces of leathery skin, opening outwards. Large, sharpened teeth surrounded the interior of its throat. As agreed upon, our company will perform a few tests on the subject before we install your preferred control link. We'll also gather the discussed data points and install the relevant trackers and monitors to retrieve the agreed-upon biometric data. The White Skull looked at the gray leathers before looking back towards the vulture head. A feeling of confusion emanated. The bid was getting a bit expensive. I'd already brought my representative from Ladler and Kosar for other business at the Hub. When this opportunity presented itself, I chatted with him about my idea, and after he consulted with his corporate office, we decided to split the costs of this venture. They pay 20% and get to run a few tests. I pay the rest and get to keep it afterwards, the lead vulture said. And I assume they are going to produce an artisan neural control link to replace that ugly collar. I'd get mocked out of my consulship if I show up with my newest decoration wearing an old-fashioned collar. Truthfully, I am a little surprised. That's what you brought it here wearing. I would ordinarily expect you to have better taste. The skull just barely held in a scoff. The ooze in its jaw snarled in annoyance. The circumstances as they are, I chose its collar with a purely utilitarian criteria. We find ourselves in a bit of a unique use case. Regardless, I had the foresight to make it one of the quick detach models. I was worried that you might have complaints. The White Skull responded. Any notes or information you've gathered, you think are pertinent to share? Have you discovered its species name? Or its diet? Or its physical abilities? The leathery-skinned creature jumped in. The skull turned back towards the voice. Not its name or diet. Its physical abilities aren't notable. It was made helpless by some of our lighter restraints. One thing my lieutenant noted was the acuteness of its senses. The leathery creature nodded its rounded, basketball-shaped head. It has the capability for tool use. From a glance at its design, its species was probably built for quick spurts of action. It's doubtful it'd do well at anything long distance. Or that got it real hot, though that's only conjecture. And its mind? It's definitely sentient. It's almost certainly sapient. Thus far, it's been relatively subdued in its actions. It knows it's beaten. Besides, it has a good life. Ahead of it, no reason for it to be worried. The White Skull had placed its attention on her again as it spoke. You hear that? You've got a good life ahead of you. A life of honest servitude. Doesn't that sound like a good time? All of your material worries and familial woes erased. Some would be ecstatic for the opportunity you've been given. All you have to give up is your free will, your agency. It's not as if you ever had either to begin with, so it's not really a loss. What would change? What would be different? You'll have the same deck of cards, just void of any false pretenses. So how about it? Just lie down and accept your new lot. It's the easy thing to do. Alice chewed her lip and sat in silence. When I sat in the car on the way home after Dad lost custody, I distinctly remember my mother sitting in the driver's seat, jubilant. My home life uprooted, and in theory hers as well. Her happy look made me so angry. Proud of her victory, not caring about the consequences. She didn't really care about me. She just wanted a one-up on Dad. Laying in bed that night, I promised to myself that I'd never follow the easy path when hard ones would lead to better places. It was my fault what happened. I can't just curl up and let the sails to the ship of my life blow whatever which way. That's what you've done. So far. You've been nothing but a passenger. I've had no chance to do anything so far. Sure you have. You've had plenty of opportunities to direct the ship, and really you're excited for this deep down, happy even. You'll no longer be expected to think for yourself, and for once you'll have people in your life who care deeply about you and your existence. Be it in a twisted way or not, you'll have their utmost attention. My dad cares about me. I know that deep down. He promised to keep you safe. Look at you now. What did he ever do for you when you visited him black and blue? Nothing. Alice closed her eyes. He's not perfect, but he does care. Tears welled up. I can't let it get under my skin now. Now isn't the time. Focus up. I have a window of opportunity that will close very soon. This is probably the closest I'm ever going to be to home. I'll have to take action soon or it'll be over. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes. We'll run through most of the basic tests we perform on new non-sapient creatures. Seeing as it is sapient, we'll also run through a few others. The head gray leather skin alien spoke to the smaller vulture. In a group of 6, they paraded through the hallways. The small vulture headed the group with its guard next to it. The group of 3 from the Ladler Corporation were also in tow. She walked in the middle, behind the vultures and in front of the trio. The leader vulture was entrusting its child to oversee her. A test of sorts from what Alice made out. What sort of ship will we travel in? The small vulture asked. We have a Hakelker Model C2, modern and quick. We had some changes made by the dockyard that produced it. An improved holding cell was installed due to the nature of our business. We also have a premium guest suite as required of our clientele. As the representative of your father, you will be provided the suite for the duration of your stay. Of course, it responded. When he thought the grayskins were no longer paying attention, he nudged the guard that followed next to it. You hear that? It whispered to the guard. He was giddy. Great news, young Lecken. The guard responded, dignified. Time passed as they navigated the facility. What sorts of tests will you perform? Lecken asked. Gas requirements and dietary needs primarily. We'll be sure to document its features and form in depth. We'll likely also cut into the webbing between its thumb and the rest of its digits until we hit resistance. That's a pretty universal way to gauge its healing ability. It's a test that works across most creatures that have opposable thumbs. The gray skin responded. Alice cringed. She tried not to react visibly as they walked. To her pleasure, they had left behind the head vulture and white skull in the room they had met in. After a while more of walking, they reached a final elevator. They exited to a shining marbled floor, a lobby fit for a sultan's palace. Eyes of 100 different species watched them as they walked. She was out of place. A dehydrated, disheveled girl being led by a leash, surrounded by presumably the high-class elites of this society. It was mismatched, their jewelry-encrusted clothing, their aura of excellence. It was contrasted by her simple green toga, her unkempt appearance. They were enamored by her. She took it all in. The smug, entertained looks, the laughs of delight, the children clamoring to each other. It was also normal to them. Insane. The small vulture tugged at her shoulder. Please stand still. It whispered into her ear gently. It fiddled with her wrist restraints, inputting a set of symbols. The restraints fell off. The vulture grabbed her wrist and raised it. Its grasp was cold and plastic feeling, like there was no blood flow through its talons. A holler of cheers rippled through the crowd. Young Lecken, I don't think you should. Leave it unbound. We don't know its capabilities. The guard spoke. The young vulture shook its head. It was drunk on the attention. Look at it, it's pitiful. It couldn't hurt a larva. He whispered into the guard's ear. It glanced back at her endearingly. The guard wanted to speak, but held its tongue. After a few minutes of the meet and greet, they passed by the crowd and made it outside. It was beautiful. Once they got past a row of concrete landing pads, the only thing she could see for as far as the horizon allowed was a landscape of rolling blue fields, insects buzzing in the evening. In the sky were several red moons. The air was a bit cold, to her skin, but not freezing. It was refreshing after the time spent in her stuffy underground cell. After a few minutes of walking, they reached a craft hovering a few inches off the ground. They unleashed her collar and ushered her in. It felt like a spacious taxi. The interior was windowless. She sat in between the two vultures, Lecken to her right. The 3 gray leather skins sat across from them. A table was in between. A server, a new species to Alice's eyes, brought drinks. The 2 groups made small talk. She sat in the middle as an invisible observer. The craft flew off skyward. She sunk into the chair she sat in when they lifted off. After a few minutes of flight, the novelty wore off and her attention returned back to her most pressing issue: thirst. She waited for a lull in the conversation before she tentatively reached out and pointed at a vase of what she assumed was water. The young vulture looked at her inquisitively. It glanced over to the gray alien sitting across from them questioningly. "It'll probably be all right. Most species require water. I haven't heard of any case of it being detrimental. At most, it'd be inert." Lecken shrugged before looking at her. "Sure, let's go for it." It poured a glass of the liquid into a cup before handing it to her. She took it with shaky hands. She brought it up to her face, and after a sniff, she took a gulp. It was bliss in liquid form. She drank the glass empty in an instant. She shoved it back to Lecken, begging for more. The vulture obliged. It gave her another glass, and then the pitcher was empty. She'd have taken more. She wanted more. Her eyes looked over to the vulture. Manic. "Calm down. We'll get you set up properly once we're off the shuttle." It looked at her comfortingly. "I know this has got to be a lot to take in. After these men do their tests, you'll be off to my homeworld Axtopple. It's beautiful. You'll finally be able to relax. You'll be able to settle in." It patted her head. It took Alice's full self-control not to recoil from its claw. "Those men back at the hub that brought you in originally aren't representative of our society, of my clan, of me. I promise I'll do right by you the best I can. See, this won't be so bad. He's nice. You'll be able to spend your days in opulence. No, this isn't right. He's being nice to his new dog. He's completing a task his father requested of him. He doesn't care about me." "Sure, he does. Look at him." She met its eyes. She saw sincerity looking back. "See? He wants what's best for you. You do what he wants, and you're golden. Just submit. It's what you want to do. It's easy." Alice imitated a smile back to the vulture. "No." They entered the ship via a bay and met several servants as they exited the shuttle. The welcoming party bowed their heads. A servant with a bronze collar around its neck led them to the guest suite. The ship's walls were a glazed white. Bright lights mounted the ceiling every few feet. As they walked, they passed by many different creatures. Some wore crew uniforms, some wore collars. They all wore a blue sash. There was a mishmash of species, but the majority were of the gray leather skin variety. Almost all of the crew were gray-skinned. Anytime they passed by a collared alien, the alien stopped and bowed its head until Alice's entourage had passed. After a bit more walking, they came to a doorway and the gray alien's flesh triangle of a mouth opened to speak. "This is the hold for the slaves and other captives. Would you like to deposit your property within until morning?" The guard looked at the son. "Young Lecken, I would advise you to do so." Lecken looked at his guard, then back at her. She shook her head, pleading, "No, that's quite all right. We'll host it within the guest suite." "Very well." The gray leather responded. There was no change in its tone or facial expressions. "We'll have to take our leave. We'll have Alania L direct you further. Feel free to ask her any questions. She'll be happy to assist you the best she can." Alice looked over to see the collared alien in question. It was a small framed creature, maybe 4.5 feet tall, covered by a deep orange fur. The eye-catching part of its face was the drooping snout it wore. The gray alien went up to it. "Let me see your panel." Elaniel presented its right forearm. "This is going to require greater access than mere verbal commands can offer." Blood bubbled up from its arm, soaking the fur red. The skin around its forearm dissolved and melted off. Elaniel's arm shook as it continued to hold it up for the gray skin. It tapped a few inputs into the panel that was now visible. "Follow any orders Mr. Lecken issues, and answer any questions he or his group have, excluding anything that would harm the ship or its crew. You are to fall under my command again in 2 weeks' time, or after Mr. Lecken is disembarked." It pointed to the boy. The panel squeezed back under the skin before new skin formed from bubbles, covering the bloody forearm, leaving its dyed red fur the only signifier that anything happened. "Yes, sir." It spoke in a quiet, soft tone. Her eyes never meeting anyone else's, the gray leather skin and his 2 colleagues gave their goodbyes for the night and headed back down the corridor they came in from. "Well then," he said. "Your name was Elaniel? Is that right?" Lecken asked. "Yes, sir. What are you trained in?" "I am trained in housekeeping and food preparation." She hesitated. "I am also trained in duties of the night." She finished. "Well, certainly good to know. By chance, are you acquainted with Axotopi sleeping requirements? I'll need a suspended cloth in a pitch-black room to achieve any decent rest." "I'll be sure to meet your expectations, sir." Lecken hesitated. "Although I'm sure you have no interest in it either, I figured I should clear the air. I am betrothed to a lovely girl back home. So, while I appreciate your willingness, I won't be in need of your services." They continued on walking, following Elaniel through the corridors. "Hey, I never figured it out for sure. Are you a male or female in your species?" Lecken asked Alice. It kept walking. "Nod your head for male, shake for female." She shook her head. "I had guessed as much, but no harm in double-checking. I kind of like you. You're my final test. Once I get you home safe and sound, I'll have my marriage. This whole thing will put me out in front of my brothers in the inheritance race. My father already prefers me. That's why he put me in charge. Of this, it's just dealing with boring scientist types, boring. My youngest sibling got sent on some suicide mission to retrieve our missing ancestral blade. I doubt the thing actually exists. It's a shame I liked him the best out of the bunch." "Is it true your father sent him on that gauntlet because he got in a fight with your mother?" the guard asked. "A little out of line, you asking that, Yakin." The guard froze for a moment, before continuing on, its face regaining its frozen expression. "Right, young Lecken, I shouldn't have asked." "No, it's okay. It's just a little odd hearing it coming from the beak of Mr. Professional himself." "I heard the same rumor. Can't tell you if it's true, though," Lecken answered nonchalantly. They continued walking. "Hey, what's that blinking light?" Lecken asked. To their right was a window looking outside to the vacuum of space. There was a door in the middle that broke the continuous nature of the long window. There was a blinking orange light above it. "That's one of our escape craft for in case of emergency." Elaniel responded. "Let me take a look inside. It's probably a good idea to know the layout, just for the sake of knowing. Good idea, young Lecken." The guard chipped in, its voice slightly proud of the young vulture. Safety conscious for once. "I'm a bit of a naval enthusiast. This stuff has always interested me." They entered the airlock to the craft. "Please be a friend, and open up the door, Elaniel." Elaniel froze for a moment before doing as she was told. The door opened. They entered the circular door. "Sir, if the crew were to see us, they may be displeased." Elaniel spoke. Lecken ignored her. "This thing is state-of-the-art. It's probably faster than the main ship for a short burst. The reactor is terribly expensive and isn't refuelable, but it's compact and it gets you going damn fast, at least from what I read. It's perfect for an emergency craft." He looked around the craft's interior, enamored. "My understanding is that they are pretty much never used and they have really good resale value. So if you've got the money, they are almost always a good investment." "Wait, does this thing have faster-than-light capability?" Lecken looked stunned. He knelt down to inspect the control panel. "That's a kick." Alice glanced around, internally noting the make of the interior. After a moment, her eyes were drawn to the blade on the hip of the guard. It was deep in thought, reading through some text on the wall of the shuttle. An idea popped into her head. Don't do it, you fool. Why not? I thought you hated me. You have a good life ahead of you. No, I don't. I have a life like hers ahead of me. She glanced at Elaniel. A slave. I have a chance now. If it goes poorly, then so be it. I'm not going to get better odds than this. Think, you idiot. You are dead if this goes wrong. Maybe not physically, but you will never have another chance. For, however long you live, you'll be nothing but a mummy. You are going to be bound so tight, the little box you woke up in will look like a mansion. You will never feel a shred of dignity again. You will be put in a coffin for 60 years, you'll be fed through a tube, and then you'll die. Alone. She took a deep breath. Don't do it, you damn fool. She had made her mind up. She strode forward and snatched the blade, ripping it from the sheath in an instant, and before anyone else in the craft knew what was happening, she swung it forward, crushing it into the guard's wiry neck. The head went limp, only held to the throat by slivers of nerves and sinew. It was dead before it knew it was disarmed. Its body collapsed to the ground, lifeless. Blood spurted on her clothing and face. It pooled on the floor. She stared at the 2 other aliens in the room. Lekin turned around stunned, staring down at his dead guard's corpse. Elaniel stared at the corpse, then glanced at Lekin, before finally resting her eyes on Alice. She was dumbfounded. She looked at Alice like what she did was the stupidest thing in the whole world. A moment later, Lekin looked up from the corpse to meet Alice's face. A mix of fear and fury showed through. He was frozen. What the fuck did you do? The vulture sputtered out. It looked at her bewildered. He puffed up his chest, extending his wings to their full length. He took a step forward. She raised the tip of the blade towards him, shaking her head. He stopped. The die is cast. You've probably sealed yourself a horrible fate, but you're no longer just an observer. Congratulations. The other self within smiled creepily, self-satisfied. She grimaced. I'll see you soon, Dad, one way or the other. Thanks for diving into this story with me. Don't miss out on the next one. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think.